There was a time when you felt the need to explain everything. You explained your intentions when people questioned your heart. You explained your silence when they misunderstood it. You explained your kindness when others saw it as weakness. As an empath, you believed that if people could just understand where you were coming from, everything would be okay. You thought clarity would create peace. You thought honesty would earn respect. You thought that if you gave enough explanations, misunderstandings would disappear. But over time, something painful became impossible to ignore. The more you explained yourself, the more exhausted you became. Some people were not confused. They were committed to misunderstanding you. Some were not seeking truth. They were seeking control. No matter how carefully you chose your words, they twisted them. No matter how sincere your intentions, they questioned them. No matter for how much of your heart you revealed, it was never enough. And that's when the awakening began. You started realizing that constantly defending yourself was draining energy that could have been used to build your own life. You were spending precious emotional resources trying to convince people who had already decided who they wanted you to be. You were fighting battles that had no finish line. The silence season begins. The moment an empath understands this truth. Not everyone deserves access to your explanations. Not everyone deserves a front row seat to your thoughts, your feelings, your reasons, and your wounds. Some people only ask questions so they can judge the answers. Some people only listen so they can find something to criticize. And some people will never understand you because understanding you was never their goal. So you stop performing for approval. You stop chasing validation. You stop carrying the burden of making everyone comfortable with who you are. For the first time, you allow your actions to speak louder than your words. You learn that peace does not come from being understood by everyone. Peace comes from understanding yourself. And when that lesson finally settles into your soul, something powerful happens. The need to defend yourself begins to disappear. The urge to explain every decision starts fading away. You become comfortable letting people think whatever they want while you continue walking your path. The old version of you would have fought to correct every false story. The new version of you understands that your energy is too valuable for that. Because maturity is realizing that your peace is worth more than winning an argument, and your silence is often stronger than any explanation you could ever give. And that is the moment your silence season truly begins. One of the hardest lessons an empath will ever learn is that not every wound comes with an apology. Not every betrayal comes with an explanation. Not every person who hurt you will suddenly wake up one day, recognize the damage they caused, and come back to make things right. For a long time, this reality feels unbearable, because deep down you believe in fairness. You believe that if you have hurt someone, you should acknowledge it. If you have broken trust, you should repair it. If you have caused pain, you should take responsibility. That is how your heart works. But not everyone operates from the same place. Some people walk away without looking back. Some rewrite the story to protect their own image. Some convince themselves they did nothing wrong. And some simply do not care enough to face the consequences of their actions. The empath struggles with this because the mind keeps searching for answers. You replay conversations, you revisit memories. You analyze every detail, hoping to find the missing piece that will finally bring peace. You tell yourself that if they would just explain why they did what they did, maybe the pain would make sense. But what if that explanation never comes? What if the apology you're waiting for never arrives? What if the person who hurt you has already moved on while you're still carrying the weight of what happened? This is where the silence season begins to change you. You slowly realize that your healing cannot be dependent on another person's behavior. If your peace requires their apology, then your peace remains in their hands. If your freedom depends on their accountability, then your freedom belongs to them. And that is a dangerous place to live, because it means your future is being held hostage by someone who may never give you what you need. The silent season teaches a different path. It teaches you that closure is not something you receive. Closure is something you choose. You choose to stop chasing answers that may never come. You choose to stop reopening wounds every time you remember what happened. You choose to stop standing at a locked door, waiting for someone to open it. Instead, you turn around and begin building a new life. A life where your healing is no longer tied to another person's actions. A life where your worth is not determined by how someone treated you. A life where your peace becomes an internal decision. And something remarkable happens when you make that choice. The pain does not disappear overnight, but it loses its control over you. The memories remain, but they no longer define you. The betrayal becomes part of your story, not the center of it. Because the moment you stop waiting for closure from others is the moment true healing finally begins. One of the biggest misconceptions people have about empaths is that silence means weakness. They assume that if you are not arguing, you have given up. If you are not defending yourself, you have nothing to say. If you walk away from conflict, they think they have won. But what they fail to understand is that there is a tremendous difference between being silent because you are afraid and being silent because you have mastered yourself. There was a time when every criticism affected you. Every harsh word stayed in your mind for days. Every misunderstanding felt like something that had to be corrected immediately. You carried conversations long after they ended. You replayed arguments in your head. You imagined better responses. You worried about what people thought of you. And that constant emotional reaction came at a cost. Your peace was always dependent on what someone else said, did, or believed. A single negative comment could ruin your day. One person's opinion could steal hours of your energy. Without realizing it, you had given other people access to your emotional controls. The silence season changes that. It teaches you that not every opinion deserves a response. Not every accusation deserves a defense. Not every conflict deserves your participation. As an empath, this lesson feels unnatural at first because your heart wants harmony. You want understanding. You want resolution. But eventually you begin to realize that some battles are designed to keep you trapped, not set you free. The moment you stop reacting to everything is the moment you start reclaiming your power. You begin observing instead of absorbing. You listen without immediately taking things personally. You hear criticism without allowing it to define your worth. You witness negativity without carrying it home with you. And suddenly, situations that once overwhelmed you no longer have the same effect. People notice the change. The person who expected an emotional reaction gets none. The person who tried to provoke you is met with calmness. The person who wanted access to your peace discovers that the door is closed. This is not coldness. This is not indifference. This is emotional maturity, because true strength is not found in controlling others. True strength is found in controlling yourself. Anyone can react in anger. Anyone can lash out when hurt. Anyone can let emotions take over in difficult moments. But it takes wisdom to remain grounded when chaos surrounds you. It takes discipline to protect your energy when others are trying to pull you into their storms. And it takes deep inner growth to understand that your greatest victory is not proving someone wrong. It is refusing to let them disturb your peace. That is when silence stops being an escape and becomes a form of emotional mastery. One of the most exhausting parts of being an empath is that you do not just feel your own emotions. You often carry the emotions of everyone around you. You walk into a room and immediately sense tension. You notice sadness hidden behind smiles. You feel the frustration in someone's voice, even when they claim everything is fine. Your heart naturally reaches toward people who are struggling, and for a long time you mistake that sensitivity for a responsibility. You begin believing that if someone is hurting, it is your job to help. If someone is angry, it is your job to calm them. If someone is broken, it is your job to fix them. And without realizing it, you slowly start carrying burdens that were never yours to carry. You become the listener, the healer, the peacemaker, the emotional shelter for everyone around you. People come to you with their problems, their drama, their pain, and their chaos. Because you care deeply, you absorb it all. You lose sleep over issues that do not belong to you. You spend hours worrying about situations you cannot control. You give your energy away so freely that eventually there is very little left for yourself. Then one day, the silence season arrives, and it teaches you a lesson that changes everything. You can care about people without carrying them. You can love people without saving them. You can support people without sacrificing yourself. This realization feels uncomfortable at first because empaths often confuse boundaries with selfishness. But boundaries are not walls designed to keep people out. They are filters designed to protect your peace. For the first time, you begin separating your energy from their chaos. You stop rushing to solve every problem. You stop taking responsibility for emotions that belong to someone else. You stop believing that another person's happiness depends entirely on you. Instead, you learn how to stand beside people without drowning in what they are going through. You begin observing rather than absorbing. You listen without carrying the weight home. You offer compassion without surrendering your peace. You become supportive without becoming consumed. And something remarkable happens. The emotional exhaustion that once followed you everywhere starts fading. The constant pressure begins lifting from your shoulders. The anxiety created by other people's problems loses its grip on your life. You finally understand that every person is responsible for their own journey. You can offer guidance, but you cannot walk their path for them. You can offer love, but you cannot heal wounds they refuse to address. You can offer support, but you cannot carry a burden that was never yours. That is the moment the empath becomes truly free, when they learn that compassion does not require self-sacrifice. And protecting their energy is an act of wisdom, not guilt. For many empaths, loneliness feels like a punishment at first. You spend so much of your life connected to other people that being alone can feel unfamiliar, even frightening. When relationships end, when friendships fade, when people drift away, or when life suddenly becomes quiet, the silence can seem overwhelming. You wonder what happened. You question your worth. You ask yourself why the people you cared about are no longer beside you. The loneliness feels heavy because you have spent years finding your value and how much you could give to others. You were the one who listened, the one who encouraged, the one who showed up when nobody else did, the one who carried everyone else's burdens while quietly carrying your own. So when the noise disappears and the crowd gets smaller, it can feel like something important has been taken from you. But then something unexpected happens during the silence season. The loneliness that once felt like a punishment slowly becomes a teacher. For the first time in a long time, there are no distractions, no constant demands from other people, no pressure to be who everyone expects you to be, no endless cycle of giving away your energy. There is only you. And that is where the real journey begins, because when you are alone long enough, you start meeting parts of yourself that were hidden beneath years of people-pleasing and emotional exhaustion. You discover what truly matters to you. You discover what brings you peace. You discover dreams that were buried beneath responsibilities. You discover strengths you never knew existed. The silence begins revealing who you are when nobody is watching. And that is powerful. Many people spend their entire lives running from themselves. They stay busy, surround themselves with noise, and constantly seek validation because they are afraid of being alone with their own thoughts. But the empath who enters the silence season learns something different. They learn that solitude and loneliness are not the same thing. Loneliness is feeling disconnected. Solitude is feeling connected to yourself. At some point, the quiet stops feeling empty. The peaceful mornings become enjoyable. The time spent alone becomes healing. The absence of constant drama becomes a blessing. You stop needing someone else's approval to feel valuable. You stop needing constant attention to feel seen. You stop depending on external validation to know your worth. And as this transformation unfolds, your relationship with yourself becomes stronger than it has ever been. You begin trusting your instincts. You begin respecting your needs. You begin honoring your boundaries. Most importantly, you begin giving yourself the same compassion you spent years giving everyone else. Because the silent season was never meant to isolate you from your life. It was meant to introduce you to the person you were always meant to become. Eventually, there comes a moment when people begin noticing that you have changed, not because you announced it, not because you made a speech about it, not because you tried to prove anything. They notice because the version of you they were used to is no longer available. The empath who once answered every message immediately is no longer rushing to be available. The empath who once tolerated disrespect to keep the peace is no longer accepting behavior that violates their boundaries. The empath who once carried everyone's emotional burdens has finally put some of that weight down. And for some people, that change is inspiring. But for others, it is deeply uncomfortable, because not everyone benefited from your kindness in a healthy way. Some people became accustomed to unlimited access to your energy. They expected you to always listen, always forgive, always understand, always give one more chance. They grew comfortable with a version of you that constantly put their needs ahead of your own. So when you begin protecting your peace, they notice. When you stop explaining yourself, they notice. When you stop reacting, they notice. When you stop chasing people who walk away, they notice. And suddenly, the same people who once ignored your needs begin asking what happened to you. They say you've changed. They say you're distant. They say you're not the same person anymore. But what they often mean is this: you are no longer behaving in ways that benefit them. The silent season teaches you not to take these reactions personally. Growth will always confuse people who are comfortable with your limitations. Your boundaries feel offensive to people who benefited from your lack of them. Your peace feels threatening to people who were accustomed to your chaos. Your confidence feels unfamiliar to people who only knew the version of you that constantly doubted yourself. This is why transformation requires courage. Because sometimes the people who celebrate your growth are not the same people who had access to you before it. And that realization can hurt. Part of you wants everyone to understand. Part of you wants everyone to support your healing. Part of you hopes that people will appreciate the healthier version of yourself. But the silent season teaches another powerful truth. You do not need permission to grow. You do not need approval to evolve. You do not need agreement to protect your well-being. Your responsibility is not to make everyone comfortable with your transformation. Your responsibility is to remain faithful to it. So when people question your boundaries, stay grounded. When people misunderstand your silence, stay grounded. When people accuse you of changing, remember that growth is supposed to change you. The goal was never to remain the same person forever. The goal was to become stronger, wiser, and more at peace than you were before. And when you fully accept that truth, you stop fearing other people's reactions and start trusting the person you are becoming. And then, after all the lessons, all the heartbreak, all the silence, and all the growth, you arrive at a place that once seemed possible. A place where pain can still exist, but it can no longer control you. This is the destination of the silent season. Not a life without challenges. Not a life without disappointment. Not a life where difficult moments never happen. But a life where your inner peace is no longer held hostage by what happens around you. There was a time when every rejection felt personal. Every betrayal felt devastating. Every criticism felt like proof that something was wrong with you. Your emotions were tied to how other people treated you. If they loved you, you felt valuable. If they rejected you, you questioned your worth. But the silent season changed that. Through every lesson, you learned something most people never fully understand. Your value was never determined by another person's ability to see it. Your worth was never dependent on someone's approval. Your identity was never meant to be built on the opinions of others. And once that truth takes root, everything begins to change. You stop chasing validation. You stop seeking permission. You stop begging for recognition from people who cannot appreciate what you bring into the world. Instead, you become anchored within yourself. You know who you are. You know what you stand for. You know what deserves your energy and what does not. And because of that, life's storms no longer shake you the way they once did. The criticism still comes, but it no longer defines you. The disappointments still happen, but they no longer break you. The setbacks still appear, but they no longer convince you to quit because your strength is no longer coming from circumstances. It is coming from within. This is what emotional freedom feels like. It is waking up without carrying yesterday's wounds into today. It is refusing to let bitterness take root in your heart. It is choosing peace even when chaos is available. It is understanding that forgiveness is sometimes something you give yourself. It is knowing that protecting your energy is not selfish. It is necessary. The empath who enters the silent season discovers something extraordinary. The sensitivity that once felt like a burden becomes a gift. The heart that once felt fragile becomes resilient. The person who once absorbed every emotion becomes someone who can feel deeply without being destroyed by what they feel. And perhaps the most beautiful part of all is this: you no longer need the world to become peaceful before you can experience peace. You carry